Do you really think you're experiencing the world exactly as it is? Well, neuroscience suggests something far more mind-bending. Maybe what you call reality isn't the world itself, but just your brain's best guess of it. Welcome to this new series. Together, we're going to explore how your brain constructs a whole universe from scratch, how it creates meaning, and how your emotions actually emerge from this wild process. And we're starting with one of the most fundamental places, the predictions our brain makes. According to some scientists, this is the brain's primary way of functioning. Think about it. Your brain is trapped inside your skull. It's locked in a dark, silent box. It has no direct access to the outside world. It doesn't see a tree, and it doesn't hear a sound directly. All it gets is data, pulses of electricity, light hitting the eyes, vibrations in the ears, chemicals in the nose, signals from your muscles and your gut. So in a way, the brain has no direct access to reality itself. All it has are fragments of data. And the brain's job is this, to figure out what those pieces mean. But the brain is not doing this by just looking at whatever data is coming in right now. It uses its only guide, past experience, everything you've ever seen, heard, lived, or learned. So the brain is constantly asking, what could be causing the signals I'm getting right now? What does this feel like from my past? What's the most likely story here? And what should I do next? Your brain isn't a passive camera recording the world. It's an active storyteller. Imagine someone looking at you without saying a word. Are they upset? Are they judging you? Or are they just tired? That look doesn't arrive in your brain with a label attached. Your brain has to interpret it. It looks at the context, your history with that person, and then, boom, it makes a prediction. This means you are not experiencing the world only through information coming in from the outside. To a large extent, you are experiencing your brain's predictions about that information. The brain takes little and big pieces from the past, matches them to the present moment, and builds a world for you. And this is not only true for perception, it is also true for action. Even before you consciously realize that you want to move, your brain has already started the motor plan your body will need according to its prediction. So the brain is not only trying to predict what is happening out there, it is also trying to figure out what am I about to do? Think of it as a loop. First, the brain makes a prediction, and that prediction is really a kind of simulation, an internal model that says, this is most likely what I'm about to encounter. Then it compares that simulation to the actual data. If it's a match, everything flows. You don't even notice it, but if it doesn't match, you get a prediction error, and the brain updates the model. Here's a secret. Prediction errors are not a bad thing. In fact, they are learning itself. Let's explain this through an example. Imagine that your brain works like a scientist. Just as a scientist builds competing hypotheses, your brain is constantly generating multiple predictions. And like a scientist, it uses the knowledge it already has, which is the past experience. It uses the past experiences to estimate how confident it should be in each one of those predictions. Then, just as a scientist compares a hypothesis to data gathered in an experiment, your brain compares its predictions to sensory data coming from the outside world. If your brain has made a good prediction, then the incoming sensory data confirms it. But of course, prediction errors happen all the time. And just like a scientist, the brain has a few different ways it can respond to these errors. If your brain acts like a responsible scientist, it updates its predictions based on the data it gets. But here's the really important part. The brain does not always act like a perfect scientist. Sometimes your brain can act like a biased scientist. It picks the information that fits what it already expects and ignores the rest. If it holds onto a prediction too tightly, you start living in your own internal model instead of reality. On this graph, you'll see two main players. On one side, we have prediction. On the other, we have sensory data. Our experience is a cocktail of both. To me, one of the most important things this graph shows is where learning happens. Learning happens when the brain compares its prediction to incoming sensory data, notices the difference, and then adjusts itself. So the brain is not just stuck inside its own guesses, but it is also not just overwhelmed by raw data. It stays flexible. But if the brain gets too attached to its own predictions, like a biased scientist trying to protect their theory at all costs, it stops letting the outside world in. Instead of correcting the error, it clings to its internal model. That's when things like paranoia, delusions, or living almost entirely inside your own head start to kick in. On the other side, if the brain ignores past patterns and leans way too hard on raw sensory data, the world starts to feel intense, raw, and completely unfiltered. Think of it like the sensory overload of an LSD trip. Now, obviously, this graph doesn't explain everything on its own, but it gives us a powerful framework. When the balance shifts, the very color of your reality changes. So, if you feel like you've been getting too caught up in your own head lately, or suspect your predictions are blocking you from seeing reality as it is, try shifting your focus. Even for just 5 minutes, direct your attention outward. Observe the world around you. Really look at the colors, lean into the sounds, and focus on the raw data of the present moment. This simple shift can pull you out of those internal loops and ground you back in the real world. Now, I want you to imagine a tiny, bright yellow, newborn ant. Most of you probably thought of a chick first, right? That's because your brain didn't see that coming. Its prediction was wrong. And that wrong prediction had to be restructured in the blink of an eye. This is just a tiny example, but this is exactly what the brain does, all the time. It's constantly making guesses. And when those guesses don't line up with sensory data, it makes a correction. And let me say this again. Wrong predictions are not a bad thing. They don't mean the system is broken. Quite the opposite. They show the system is actually working. Because if our brains never made a prediction error, we would never learn anything new. Nothing would ever surprise us. The world would feel flat, old, and predictable. As adults, our brain's predictions are usually good enough to keep us alive. But it's fascinating to ask, how much of our experience is actually coming from the outside world, and how much is built by our brain's own internal models? You might think your perception of the world is shaped by external events, but in reality, your perceptions are deeply tied to your predictions. In a sense, the brain is constantly experiencing a world of its own creation. But this inner world isn't disconnected from reality. It's like a dance, an endless dialogue between prediction and correction, simulation and data, the internal model and the external world. To me, this idea is incredibly liberating, because then we start looking at our experiences through a different lens. Alongside the question, why do I feel this way, comes an even deeper one. What is my brain predicting right now? How much of what I'm feeling is true to the present moment, and how much of it is just an old pattern my brain carried over from the past? Being able to make this distinction can be truly transformative. It shows us that while we may not always be able to change what's happening on the outside, the pen is still in our hands when it comes to our own experience. Once we take that responsibility, we realize we have the power to reshape how we live through those moments. Our brain doesn't just predict signals, it generates meaning, stories, and emotions from them. In the next video, we're going to dive into exactly how the brain constructs these emotions. I think you'll be surprised to see how much of an impact these tiny sensory signals have on how you feel. See you in the next one.